Welcome to your English lesson for Monday the 11th of January. We're going to continue with our book Stella by Starlight, and today we're going to have a look at a split narrative. Our learning intention is to identify the features of a first-person split narrative. So before we begin, really, you need to think about what it means by first person. And then also we're going to have a look at what a split narrative is. As we go through today's session, we're going to give you a model example of a narrative. So one will be written by one person's point of view and the other will be written in the other person's point of view. You need to read through both narratives before you can do the lesson. You can identify the features that have been used by the author, and at the end you're going to explain the impact the features have on the reader. I'm going to leave that LI at the top of the screen, and let's have a little bit of a look into what we mean by a split narrative. So we are going to show you one piece of writing that is written from Stella's point of view or her perspective. And then we're going to look at another piece of writing from a character called Mr. Pineville's point of view or perspective. Now, we're going to be jumping on in the book from the point that we last left off at, but that's okay. We only need to think about the bits that we're looking at directly in this individual part of the story. We will go back to where we've left off a bit later on. Both pieces of writing are talking about the same thing. So it's election day in the book, and it's going to be regarding Stella's dad going to vote, and Mr. Pineville actually is somebody who works as something called a registrar. In other words, he is looking after the votes that are cast, and he is responsible for collecting up those votes. As we read through the narratives, you're going to need to think about the following features. Now, on Google Classrooms, there is a document that has been provided for you, so you can always list the examples of the sentences in the document on Google Classrooms. But if you haven't got access to Google Classrooms yet, you can make a list of these headings on a piece of paper or type them up onto a document on your laptop. And you can just give examples of these individual things as we find them in the text. So we're going to be looking for verb openers. And again, you need to think about what a verb is. So it's going to be an action or a doing word. So it's going to be an opener, something at the beginning of a sentence which describes an action. You're going to have a rhetorical question. Now, again, that is a question that is asked that doesn't need an answer. You're going to be looking for dashes provided for extra information. So we could be talking about something in particular in the text, and then there's going to be some extra information provided about that particular thing. Think about multi-clause sentence structure. So in other words, are we using something other than just simple sentences? Where are they, and can we find examples of those? Parenthesis is something slightly different to dashes for extra information. So it can include dashes, but it can also be shown by use of commas, and it can also be shown by use of brackets as well. And that parenthesis provides more detail about a particular thing that's being talked about. An adverbial opener, we've looked at fronted adverbials in both Autumn 1 and Autumn 2 in both of our writings that we've done in school so far. So we're going to be thinking about what fronted adverbials are, and can we find examples of those in the text. Now, again, bear in mind, they are openers, so they are going to be found at the beginning of sentences. The figurative devices, so can you identify any metaphors, any similes, any personification or repetition? And again, we've looked at all of those things in both Autumn 1 and Autumn 2, so you need to think about what that figurative device is. You might think of it as being called figurative language before. and short sentences. So something that is just short, punchy, and normally done in order to emphasize a point. So if you don't have access to the document that is on Google Classrooms at the moment, you might want to just pause the video for a moment and jot down those headings just so that you can look for examples in the text as we go through. Okay, I'm going to leave those headings up in the top corner, and here's the text that we're going to be looking at. So this first one is written from Stella's perspective. It begins, strolling closer to town, and the overhanging limbs of the oak trees start to break, allowing for sunlight to dapple through the leaves. The continuous chirping of birdsong makes way for the hustle and bustle of rickety wagons, the clip-clop of horses' hooves, and the rumbling engines of a couple of automobiles. Thoughts running wild. There is a sense that the peace and tranquility of today would soon be marred by the feeling of tension and anxiety. Papa, why are you choosing to vote today? I'm confused. Why did he want to do this? After all that has happened with the clan and what the pastor had said, why would he anger them in this way? Papa's determined stare breaks as he casts his conker brown eyes down towards me and with his soft smile explains, Stella, of course I'm scared, but I'm doing this for my family, for you and your brother. I got to show that I am somebody and that we African American folk are equal. I place my hands on top of Papa's gnarled fingers. I've never felt so proud of him, although a sense of worry is still lingering at the back of my mind. Is this going to be worth it? The chaos of the small city overwhelms me, all the noises, aromas, and hundreds, if not thousands of people. Abruptly, we stop in front of a big white building with beautifully straight stone pillars flanked by frighteningly straight stone-faced policemen. The mob is a bubbling pot of gumbo, spitting heat and fear. It's strange. There seems to be some people who are elated, ecstatic, black folk cheering. But then there's these older white guys. There are less of them, but their angry signs scream hate. Voting for us, not for them. White America. Fools. Pensively, Papa's gnarled fingers grip tighter and tighter. His eyes are giving that determined glare again. A glare right at the large sign on the door of the building. Register your votes. Dr. Hawkins is stood looking at us, giving Papa a nod, which straightens his back and broadens his shoulders. We take a step forward. Like the Red Sea split by Moses, we walk down the centre. Cheers on the left of us, torrents of abuse on the right. We take another step. The crowd bubble louder and louder. Dr. Hawkins places his hand on my father's shoulder, steadying him. Looking down at me through his half-moon spectacles, his confidence radiates through me. With that confident look, we stride the last few meters forward. This is it, Dr. Hawkins proclaims. A proud step in our movement, Jonah. Equality. Now this slide is written from Mr. Pineville's perspective. Now, as I said, he is the gentleman who is responsible for allowing people in to vote and making sure that the voting takes place and is fair. So let's have a look at what he's thinking of the voting process. Stunningly, the bright sunlight of the early morning reflects sharply onto the highly polished marble lobby floor as I open the doors and breathe in the fresh air outside. Another beautiful morning. I inhale deeply. I'm ready for the day ahead. My name is Amherst Pineville, and I am proud to be a citizen of this great nation, the United States of America, a place where man can be free to have their say. I mean worthy men, who are white, of course. These black folk are a bunch of troublemakers. They're causing me a lot of bother at work lately. Almost unbelievably, they want the right to vote. Can you believe it? No chance of that happening anyway. They have to pass the test first. The test which I can pass with eyes closed is designed to catch them out. Most of them can't even read and write. It's all about the Constitution of the United States of America, my home, my nation. We don't need any of this change. As this morning draws on, I begin to hear the commotion brewing outside the proud building which stands in the middle of Bumblebee, this once quiet American town. Now queues of white protesters, many of which are close personal friends of mine, are lining the stony path, gathered on the pristine lawns. Their vicious yells, shouts, and jeers cast a shadow over the striking building. Suddenly, the riotous noise builds as the doors swing open dramatically, and there stand 3 black men. One with a small girl clinging to his hand like a limpet on a rock. "What your boys want?" I snarl at them, looking them up and down with anger in my eyes. How dare they come in here? Okay, so now I'm going to use a copy of the grid and the headings that we were talking about earlier. So, for example, I've got here a verb opener at the top of the screen. I'm just going to circle that so that you're clear on what I'm talking about. So I'm looking at the verb opener feature. Now, remember we talked about earlier that a verb opener is an action. And I can see as I start to read straight away, the first thing I can see here is strolling. The word says strolling. That's an action. It's like a slow walk. So I'm going to make a note of that in my example. A verb opener, capital S, strolling. Okay. Now I'm going to have a look further down and think, is there anything else that I can find in terms of a rhetorical question? In other words, a question that doesn't need an answer. And I'm coming through the text and I can see a question mark there. I'm having a look at the sentence it's in and it says, "Papa, why are you choosing to vote today?" And it's clearly outlined with speech marks, inverted commas. So Stella is talking there. Now, to me, that doesn't mean that that's a rhetorical question. It's actually Stella is asking a question and she expects an answer to it from her father. So this isn't an example of a rhetorical question. There is, however, a rhetorical question in this text. I wonder if you can find it, and I'm not going to give you the answer right now. I'm going to have a look at the next one then, dash for extra information. Now I can see plenty of dashes littered all the way through this piece of writing. So I wonder whether some are extra information or some are for parenthesis. Let's have a look at multi-clause sentence structure. So have we got some sentences on here which have got more than just a simple main clause in there? Let me think about this sentence here where it begins abruptly, comma. We stop in front of a big white building, comma, with beautiful, straight stone pillars flanked by frighteningly straight, stone-faced policemen. Now, it appears to me that there is more than one clause in there and they're not all main clauses. Is that a multi-clause sentence? I'm going to leave it up to you to decide whether you put that in there or not. Parenthesis. Remember, we've talked about parenthesis and we've said that it can be shown either by a pair of commas, it could be shown by a pair of dashes, and it can even be shown by brackets as well. So you need to have a look through the text and find an example of some parentheses from that text as well. I'm going to not go into far too much detail about everything else because I don't want to give you all the answers, but let's have a look at an adverbial opener. Now, an adverbial opener, the idea of that is to give you a grounding either in an area so where the story is taking place. Maybe could be in the time it's taking place. It could be how it's taking place, what exactly is happening at that particular time. So I'm going to have a look up here, and in this paragraph here, and it says pensively, Papa's gnarled fingers grip tighter and tighter. Now, I know that we're here talking about Papa's fingers and they're gripping hold of Stella's hand. Pensively. Now, you need to think about, is that a verb opener or is that an adverbial opener? Remember, an adverb describes a verb. A verb is an actual action. Maybe let's have a look at this part up here. It says Papa's determined stare breaks, comma. Is that an adverbial? Have you spotted any metaphors, similes, personification, or repetition as we've gone through? And again, we've covered those features in previous terms. And lastly, short sentences. Are there any short sentences in this piece of writing? Now, I know I can see in this paragraph here, for example, I've got a single word sentence, just ecstatic. So I'm going to make a note of that because that is definitely a short sentence. Ecstatic. But if I just read on very slightly, I can see there is yet another very short sentence next to it. And again, I'd want to make a note in there as well. Can you spot any more in this piece of writing and also the other piece of writing that we looked at too? Once you've finished that, you're going to need to look at your very last part on your steps to success. So what we'll have done is read the model example writing very carefully. We will have had a look at the features that the author has used. This is the last bit we're going to do here. We're going to explain the impact the features have on the reader. So you're going to choose just one of the features that you've identified, and then you're going to reflect and describe the impact that that feature has on the reader. And again, as we've discussed before, please don't just put the answer that it makes the writing more interesting for the reader, because that's not a reason. Good luck. I look forward to seeing your finished work in the Google Classrooms, or if you can't do that, then if you can just take a photo of it and upload it for us, and I can't wait to see what you produce.